Hi class, this is Professor Garner. Today I'm going to do a short lecture for you introducing MLA style before we go into the writing of the rough draft of the rhetorical analysis. Now, the rhetorical analysis should be a little bit easier because you're only citing one source, so it's a good introduction to MLA. As the semester moves on, we'll move into more complex use of MLA because we'll be using multiple sources, like the essay does that is up on the screen now. This is an example of the research essay from a different semester. And I'll be using it to point out some ways that the student used MLA style. Before we do that, though, let's talk for a minute about what MLA style is and why it's important. MLA style stands for the Modern Language Association. That's what MLA means. That is a literal group of people that you can join. I could join it as an English teacher, and they make decisions and create a handbook for citing sources correctly. It's important to use sources so that your reader is not confused by any kind of weird format. If we're all using MLA style, then when a reader sees something like quotation marks and things in quotation marks, or if they see things in parentheses, they're not confused by what those things are. They know that that is simply the formatting for MLA style. So there are a couple different citation styles for humanities courses like English. Some of the social sciences, not social sciences, like classes like, in our humanities division. Now I'm blanking on all the humanities type classes. But they all use MLA style. Another citation style is APA, which stands for American Psychological Association. You'll see that in your science classes. There's other styles like Chicago. So they all vary slightly by the disciplines, but they all are the same idea, is that it is citing sources to give credit to the authors. All right, we need to give credit to the people who do the work and not just take their words and use them as our own, or take their ideas and use them as our own. In fact, if you do that, right, you can get in big trouble. At the college, it means that you can get reported for a violation of our academic honesty policy. That can mean a 0 on the essay. If you do it more than one time, that it could also result in expulsion from the college. So it's something that we take seriously, and I take it seriously. I don't want to be that kind of person to report you, but I think that it's also an important learning lesson. And so I have and I will report students for violations of the academic honesty code. So that's one reason it's important, right? But we don't want to be plagiarizers. But also it shows that you're a good researcher. It helps build your ethos as a writer to use MLA style and use it correctly. If you make mistakes, then your audience might not trust you. When they see you doing it right, they see your effort, and that builds your ethos as a writer. Okay, so let's get down to the nuts and bolts about MLA style. So we've already talked about, and you watched a video by my colleague Jeff Moore talking about how to format your paper in MLA style, right? So where you put your last name and the page number up in the corner, you put your name, you put your professor's name, the course, and the date, right? And it's all set up like this, Times New Roman, no extra spaces, and it's double spaced, Times New Roman 12 point. Okay, so we've already watched a video, and hopefully you know that's the way to set it up in MLA style. Now, with MLA style, there are two parts. There are the in-text citations, such as here, all right, and then, of course, there is the works cited page at the end. I'm not going to go too far into the works cited page. You can look at the library website to do that. We'll talk about resources later for works cited pages. For this one, there's just one source to cite. Do your best. I'm not going to mark you off if you have incorrect citation on the works cited page. I will note to you if it is incorrect so that you can work on fixing that. Just a few notes about the works cited page. It should always be a page by itself. It should start with the words works cited centered at the top, and then it will be in alphabetical order by whatever comes first, the author's last name, or if there is no author, then the title of the article. It should be double spaced, and it's in this format called a hanging indent. While I'm here, I'll show you the easiest way to do a hanging indent. Pretend this isn't already indented. This is in Word, is to select it like this, go under the paragraph, click this little corner, and where it says special here, you change it to hanging. Then that'll change everything. If you do that, if you have your works cited all together, you can select the whole thing and change it all to hanging indent at once. Okay, so that is the works cited page. Again, we're not going to talk too much more about that. I want to focus on the in-text citations. In-text citation is, of course, linked to the works cited page, and I'll show you how. All right, so a couple ways you can do this. Let's start here. Okay, so here you see the author of this paper has introduced a new source by Alan Francis. All right, this paper is about the tragic loop, which she learned about, which is somebody else's term, which she cites up above. And the tragic loop is people with mental illness getting arrested, put in prison, their mental illness is not treated, they get out of prison, they have some other problem that's probably related to their mental health, and then they end up back in prison. And so how we can break that cycle. That's the tragic loop and what this paper is about. So in this passage, she talks about the article, What Drives Our Disorganized Mental Health Policies. All right, you see the article's title is in quotation marks. It is in quotation marks because it is from a different kind of, it's within a different kind of publication, right? Articles in a bigger publication are in quotation marks. So article titles in quotation marks, the name of the publication that this article would be in would be italicized, right? So let's say this was an article from the New York Times, you would italicize New York Times, the article within the New York Times in quotation marks, all right? Name of magazines, books, big works like that, always in italics. Smaller works that are usually inside of bigger works are in quotation marks. Okay, so this article, the article, What Drives Our Disorganized Mental Health Policies, by Alan Francis, MD, an American psychiatrist and also chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at Duke University School of Medicine, explains the neglect endured by the mentally ill. All right, so this is a nice example of a signal phrase that the author of this article has done. She's given the qualifications for the source here, which is great because that actually helps build your ethos as the writer of the paper, because it shows like you went out and you got not just any source, not just, Dr. Alan Francis, your primary care doctor or something, but you went out and got the chair of the Department of Psychiatry at Duke University, somebody probably really respected. So that helps build your ethos as a writer, that you went and got the best sources that you could find. So it's good to put that in the paper and introduce these people. Also, it helps the reader say, why should I care? Who is this Alan Francis? If we didn't say who he was, be like, why is Alan Francis somebody I should believe? So it's good to introduce who they are and give more information. Again, not so necessary on this paper. You'll be introducing Frank Bruni for other reasons. Okay, so she's introduced Alan Francis, then she's given the quote. The neglect of the really sick is promoted by attempting to cut costs by underfunding and prioritizing appropriate community treatment and housing. They overspend much more money on prison beds for the 350,000 mentally ill who wind up getting locked up inappropriately for nuisance crimes avoidable had treatment been available. All right, so that's the quote right there. When they use a ... that means that they're leaving something out, all right? Never leave out anything that would affect the meaning of the sentence and change the meaning. Often you'll use a ... to take out something that's not necessary at that moment. Maybe there's a lengthy example or something that you want the example, you just want what the example is referring to. So that's one way to do it, to introduce the source at the beginning and then end with a quote, or end their quote. Another way, down here, now she's quoting from Francis again, but this time she uses a parenthetical citation. Parenthetical citation basically just means it's within parentheses. So instead of saying Dr. Francis says here, she gives a quote from Francis and puts it at the end in parentheses. Okay, once again, another quote from Francis down here. All right, now she's introducing a new article. The article, When Will We Solve Mental Illness? It was published in the New York Times, written by Benedict Carey. All right, so again, citing Carey. Another way she could do this is she could take out Carrie here. Then, oops, lifetime. Oh, my cursor jumped. Lifetime. Then period. Oh, the cursor keeps jumping. And put the quotes here. And she could introduce it up here. Carrie says, comma, the arrival of biological. And then the quote up there. Instead of doing it. It was better probably she had it at the end because she's also saying here. I'm going to show you this next one. Now, this is a little bit too much Carrie in this essay or in this paragraph. But I want to show you here she has Carrie cites a study run by college professor of psychology, Hornstein. So if you can do an indirect quote. All right. So if she was quoting from Hornstein, she could say Carrie cites a study run by professor of psychology, Gail Hornstein, who said, ... All right. Then we know not to look on the works cited page for Carrie, or for Hornstein rather, that it's going to be something within Carrie's article. So that's the way that you might introduce an indirect source, which you could do in the Frank Bruni article. You could say Frank Bruni quotes, I can't think of the name of the guy who he quotes, his friend, but he quotes that person who said this. Okay, here's an example of this article does not have a author, the types of mental health treatments. And so when there's no author in the parentheses, you can just, sometimes if it's a long title, you could abbreviate it to, types of. That doesn't make sense, but sometimes it would make sense to just use the first two words. So you can put a shortened version of the title, and you can do that in parentheses. Here she has it in both places. Okay. And then let's just go and see. We've talked about types of mental treatments. We've talked about an article by Carrie and Francis. So the other thing we can do is when we go back down to the Works Cited page, okay, here we see the Carrie article. It was published in the New York Times. I guessed right. All right, here's the article by Francis, published in the Psychiatric Times. And the one called Types of Mental Health Treatments. Okay, now I'm just noticing that she did this wrong, because if she's got an author here, she should have the author and not the name of the article in the parentheses. If there is an author, then she should have that in the parentheses. You see it has Scott Thomas here is the author. When it has et al., that means there's more people, and generally that means there's 4 or more different authors. And then you would use et al., which is Latin for and others. Okay, so I think that gives you a little introduction to MLA style, why you should do it, and gives you some examples of how it looks. So I hope you found that helpful, and thanks for watching. Bye.